All right, welcome to Mycology 101. We're going to get started a little bit. I'll tell you about Central Texas Mycological Society. So we formed as a nonprofit not long ago, right at the cusp of COVID, late 2019. And our mission is to strengthen the conservation, research, and study of fungi in Central Texas. And we are supported by membership, and we'll be giving away a membership today. So everyone, please pay close attention. This is how we keep you all engaged. And memberships, get you discounts on events, merch, and you get priority information on things coming up because we've been selling out of all of our events because there's just so much enthusiasm for mycology. And I'm sure a lot of you may have seen the Fantastic Fungi movie. There's all kinds of things going on. Some of them I will cover in the presentation today. So we do about 4 events per month. We host both online and in person, and some hybrid events like today. And you can check out our calendar at centraltexasmycology.org. So to start off, does anybody recognize the mushroom in our logo? And feel free to unmute or drop it in the chat. So the Texas cigar, yeah, that is the common name. So to let everyone know, this is a mushroom called the Coreactrus gaster, or the Texas star mushroom. And our organization worked with advisors and the legislature this past year, and we now have an official state mushroom. We're one of 3 states that actually recognize a mushroom, and it's pretty exciting to see, but there are bills now in California, New York, other states are following suit and helping sort of bring mycology into the fore as all of the other things in our ecosystem. And so you may start to hear the terminology funga, and that's a new word that is being added to the nomenclature. So we all know flora, we also know fauna, and now we have funga, and we want to elevate fungi because of its importance in our ecosystem to the same level as these other categories. So this last year, there's an organization that changes scientific language, and I can't remember the acronym, but they changed they added funga to the science texts, and so you'll start to see that terminology change in textbooks and used online and elsewhere. So a little bit more about this mushroom. Here are a few photos. So Coreactrus gaster, or the cigar mushroom, or the Texas star mushroom, is actually unique to Central Texas, and it's very geographically rare and found in only one other geographic location randomly, and that is Japan. It was found there in the 70s and 80s, and scientists still don't quite understand why this mushroom is so geographically distributed. Has anybody seen this mushroom? So throughout the fall, coming up here, probably November, December, take a look around stumps of dead cedar elms. So they decompose cedar elms, and they fruit starting out looking like a cigar. And then at a certain point, if the moisture and everything is just perfect, it will open radially into a star-like arrangement into 4 or 7 leathery rays. And we've even seen, and someone recorded this last year, and this was, it actually makes a hissing noise, the way that the air catches it, maybe some of the pressure from the mycelium, and we'll talk a little bit more about mycelium in this talk, but it makes this hissing noise and it spreads the spores. So it's a very unique mushroom that is truly only found in our part of the world. So it makes a great state mushroom, and we're super proud. And we chose a good mushroom for our logo back, 3 years ago. And so we also sell t-shirts, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to flaunt our state mushroom and logo, definitely check that out on our website. Here's a few other photos of the morphology, the cigar shape. We also see it in its stars. So now a little bit about me. So my name is Angel Schatz, and I live in Austin, and I've been here since about 2001. And so I worked for a long time in digital design and animation, mostly for the web. And more recently, I've kind of moved into the sort of wood wide web, where I'm focusing more on food systems, helping others build resistance and resilience, and everything from foraging, urban gardening, art workshops, that sort of thing. And so I grew up in the Midwest, and thankfully, I was exposed to mushrooms at a very young age. So morels were a very popular mushroom in Missouri, and I would go out with my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, and all my siblings. And once I found out this mushroom actually grew in Texas, it actually has evolved to be able to grow without a deep freeze. So the Texas morels do grow here, and I looked for them for several years, couldn't find them. And then when the pandemic hit, everything shut down. And normally I'm busy during South by Southwest, going to the tech conference or music conference. And I found my first Texas morel when the pandemic shut everything down. And I decided I didn't want to watch the news, wanted to be outside in nature, away from all the chaos. And I found my first Texas morel. And so here are some of what I call melfies, mushroom selfies, of some of my favorite mushrooms. So on the left there, you see me with a destroying angel, and that's another mushroom that, of course, caught my attention because of my name. I learned about that at a very young age, and that's one that in Central Texas, it's very important to know this mushroom. And if you know any mushroom, this is the one to know. So this is a deadly poisonous mushroom. So then in the middle is me with a Texas morel. And then on the right is me holding a bunch of golden oysters that I grew in my garden with sweet potatoes. So first, some general history and terminology. So we're going to talk about what is mycology. We're going to talk about what fungal terms used by mycologists, the history of fungi, and then the infinite fungal life cycle. And then we'll talk about different kinds of fungi and how they relate to our ecosystem. So to start off, we'll talk about terms that I'll be using throughout. So spores are sort of like the microscopic reproductive method. Hyphae are a single filament of mycelium, and mycelium is a system of hyphae. Colonization is mycelium growing together. Mycorrhizal means that it's related to the roots, and symbiotic is a mutually beneficial organism. And then parasitic is living at the expense of the host. So we'll start on the history. So does anybody know what year the fungi queendom, I like to call it a queendom since we are on Mother Earth. So what year was this added to the scientific texts? So here's some hints, and feel free to put it in the chat, say it out loud. So mushrooms were grouped with both plants and animals until about 1969. And so a scientist named Robert Whitaker published the first major revision to the two kingdom classification system, and he proposed there be about 5 queendoms, this meaning that fungi now had its own. And just a few years later, as everybody knows, we started the sort of war, the so-called war on drugs. And so this created a lot of mycophobia in our culture, and we're starting to see some of that undone. A lot of people's lives were changed, and I'm sure a lot of you know that history. So That's something that our organization, we're here to show everyone that not only that all mushrooms are magic. So we want to show people how important they are to every aspect of our lives. And so we've only identified about 10% of mushrooms on this planet. So we're going to zoom out and look at the phylogenetic tree of life. So fungi that you see here where the arrow is, it diverted from other life around 1.5 billion years ago. So fungi are closer to animals and plants, and long before humans could live on this planet, the fungi queendom that started in the water has been cycling nutrients and connecting living things from the roots to living within plants like a microbiome, helping them communicate with insects, to creating the colors and pigments, to the aromas, the flavors, and the medicinal compounds. And fungi are the largest and oldest living organism. So fungi has lived through all the mass extinctions and has worked with the microbes and bacteria, eventually making a livable, breathable planet for us. So thank you, fungi. So we share about 50% of our DNA with fungi. And mycelium and mushrooms, they inhale oxygen and exhale carbon, just like us. And so here we're zoomed into even more of this phylogenetic tree, which shows different clades of brown rot and white rot fungi as they have evolved through the many epochs and mass extinctions, which you see here along the x-axis. And so why do you all think that oil and coal are finite? Any guesses? Please share in the chat. Okay, so I'm going to explain what this infographic shows us because there's a lot going on here. So before the green line, you see what are called brown rut fungi, and these sort of groupings or clades. And these type of fungi decompose and consume the cellulose and wood and leave behind lignin, which looks like brown sort of parts of wood. And it's about 7% of fungi that we know, and it decomposes many conifer plants. And on the other side of the green line, after the Jurassic period, you see a group called white rot fungi. So does everybody know what happened during the Jurassic period? So we all know that there was like a mass extinction event, right? All the dinosaurs died, a lot of living things died, went back, went into the ground and created our fossil fuels. And so fungi has evolved since then. So where you see that green line, it began consuming both cellulose and lignin. And this is why fossil fuels and coal are not an infinite resource. And thanks to this clade of white rot fungi, it now breaks down the carbon matter and making them into soil rather than fossil fuels. So oyster mushrooms and things like lion's mushrooms, which are popular culinary mushrooms. We also teach people how to grow these and compost with them. And you can find them in fancy grocery stores as well. And these are white rot decomposer fungi. And so this is one of the other reasons why I believe all mushrooms are magical. They make life on this planet livable, and it's possible for us now that the fungi has started to evolve and it's changed the course in this planet. It will hopefully limit the amount of fossil fuels that we continue to this day to extract. So here's an infographic of the mushroom life cycle, which is largely invisible. And so mushrooms are simply the fruit body or the reproductive organs in the mushroom life cycle. And for most species, this just occurs in a few days and then it disappears. And so a lot of fungi don't even create fruit bodies. They just live within the cell walls of plants and never create sort of what we know as mushrooms. And so spores, we like to consider them kind of like seeds, but they reproduce very differently than seeds. But they hold a lot of genetic information, about half of the genetic information. And spores have, they are the unicellular dispersal unit with specialized adaptations that protect the cell until the environmental conditions are favorable for the mushroom to grow or germinate. So this germination or inoculation. Sometimes spores fall on a growth medium or a substrate is what it's called in the cultivation setting. And if the conditions in the medium are moist, favorable, the spores will germinate. And so next, during the spore germination, fine, thin threads of filament called the hyphae grow from the spores. And the compatible hyphae mate and create fertile mycelium. And so developing mycelium breaks down organic matter and absorbs nutrients from its surroundings. During this stage of growth, the mycelium expands at an exponential rate. In its environment, mycelium encounters many competitors and predators, which it repels with an amazing array of protective enzymes and compounds. In this sense, the mycelium is the immune system of the mushroom. So the next thing that happens is there's a Heifal Knot. And so mycelium condenses into these sort of knots, or what we call primordia, or baby mushrooms. Another name of them are pins. They kind of look like bowling pins. And so from the thousands of primordia, the growing organism selects the most promising few to develop into mature fruit bodies or mushrooms. And so now we're back to the beginning of the infinite cycle where the fruit body releases its spores into the environment for germination. And so those that land on that substrate, the favorable substrate, will grow again, and the life cycle begins again. And so when we're out in the wild looking at mushrooms, a lot of people sort of ask, should I pick a mushroom? A lot of times, like humans, animals, insects even, there are the key reason for spore dispersal. And then in addition, there's things like wind. Wind carries spores, as well as, they'll get picked up, and spores can travel all across the globe in clouds and in wind patterns. And so, so people sometimes ask, is it okay for me to pick a mushroom? It's important to sort of look at the context and look at the ecosystem. If there's only one mushroom, you should let it finish its life cycle. If there's a bunch of them, it's not going to hurt to pick, in the same way that, like, if you're foraging for food, you want to take just a third, leave some for the wildlife, and leave some for the cycle to complete itself. So here you see the anatomy and features of a mushroom, which again, is just the fruit or reproductive organ of the organism. So you see caps, some of them have scales, striations, zonations, and then there's the stipe. You also have pores on some mushrooms, some have gills, teeth, and then there's tubes on some mushrooms. There's also, on some mushrooms, you may have like a ring or a skirt. There's certain species that may have like a vulva, scales, or what's called reticulation. So this is all just terminology that you use when you're describing and identifying and observing mushrooms and taking field notes. So yeah, and then down to the mycelium again, which is the underground part, the vegetative part of the fungus. And so spores are everywhere. So every breath contains about 1 to 10 detectable spores. And a recent study that came out last year sampled the air in Oklahoma and found nanoparticles of spores. And it's now believed that there are 2 to 3 times more in the way of fungal spore fragments than we previously thought. And so the most important part of fungal life, the life cycle, lives underneath our feet. And so, as I mentioned, the movie Fantastic Fungi, if you've ever noticed, they get into this, but if you've ever noticed these sort of spider web-like strands in the soil, this is what's called mycelium. And it's responsible for creating the mushrooms. And mycelium are so tiny that 1 cubic inch of soil can contain enough mycelium to stretch for 8 miles. And it is the vegetative part of the fungus, consists of a network of fine white filaments called the hyphae. And these spiderweb-like strands of mycelium are needed to help the fungi organism stay alive. And the more it touches, the more it consumes and eventually recreates itself. And so fungi is a large part of the reason why we have soil, and a huge reason why all living things have a surface to walk on. And so mycelium forms this important communication network, sometimes called the Wood Wide Web or the Earth's Internet. You may have heard this, this name online or from other mycologists. And so this web underneath our feet connects the vast system of roots from plants and trees all over the planet like an underground internet, distributing nutrients and water through this tube-like network. And so 95% of plants form this relationship with fungi. And so through these tubes of mycelium, information about the environment, such as changes in soil moisture, water purity, and pollution, are communicated to the ecosystem. And plants, insects, and microbes use this information for their survival and coexistence. So globally, the total length of fungal mycelium in the top 10 centimeters of soil is more than 450 quadrillion kilometers. And there's a new nonprofit called Spun Earth that is using machine learning tools to help map the global network of fungal mycelium. And so if you saw the New York Times last weekend, the front page covered this very important new work. And so I'm going to drop the link in the chat for everyone so you can take a look at that. And we're very excited. So as soon as this article came out, we announced on our website we're partnering with the Balcones Canyon Land Preserve, the City of Austin, and Travis County, and a mycologist from New Mexico. So in late September, we're also going to be doing some soil samples to help map this network and do some research on some theories about how our ash junipers are very beneficial to our ecosystem and actually help protect our water and create our karsts that are super important for our water source in Central Texas. So if you are interested in participating in this, I'm dropping a link in the chat on how you can sign up. And the deadline to sign up is April 15th. So it's coming up quick. And I know the Canyonlands is some of the locations are a little bit closer to you all in the Highlands area. So please join this partnership with the City of Austin, Travis County, and the BCP. And so if you're wanting to know more, last fall, we had Dr. Colin Averill, who once did Mycorrhizal. He did his PhD at UT. He joined us to talk about this project. And so he's with Spun, and he talked about the mycorrhizal network, how important mycorrhizal is for carbon capture, and why it's so important and why we should care as we are continuing to see the impacts of climate change due to human disruption to our planet. So fungi can live everywhere, in the ocean, deserts, volcanic lava flows, and even the ocean. So fossilized mycelium and lava flows have also been found to be about 2.5 or 2.4 billion years old. And this would make fungi the earliest known complex multicellular life, one of the first living networks. And so fungi can survive in vacuums of space, deep in the bottom of the ocean, And it's likely that at some point spores made it to our bubbling hot planet through traveling in space dust. And so over 400 million years ago, long before humans were alive, a giant fungi called Prototaxides was the size of trees, feasting on the dead plant matter, growing slowly into the largest living thing on land. And it ultimately, made life on land possible. And so here is a photo of the fossil that was found several years back. And if you have more interest in this particular fungi, there's a PBS show called Eons. Some of you may have seen episodes of this. There's one on Prototaxides, so you can watch that online. And so mycelium can exert enough force to penetrate through asphalt, through plastics like mylar and Kevlar. And here you see a stinkhorn or Phallus impudicus, which can grow about 6 inches an hour. And so when a stinkhorn mushroom crushes through an asphalt road, it produces enough force to lift an object weighing about 286 plus pounds. And one study estimated that if a hyphae, which is just the single strand of mycelium, was as wide as a human hand, it would be able to lift an 8-ton school bus. So that's very powerful. That's a very powerful thing that's underneath our feet. And so you can, if you follow us on social media, I actually shared a photo. Someone in the Colorado area shared a photo on Facebook of a type of mushroom called the train wrecker. And the common name says it all, but it is another one that exudes a lot of force coming up through the ground, and it actually grows on a lot of railroad ties and has been known to derail trains. So someone posted a photo of it busting through asphalt. So yeah, if you follow us on social media, check that out. It's quite a sight to see. So one of the reasons we find mushrooms so scary or something we shouldn't touch is that they can kill humans. So in the 15th century in Europe, there was a lot of prominent figures who died or who were assassinated from consuming toxic fungi, and it still happens. It still happens today where people accidentally consume fungi, and so we want to make sure that we, tell people how important it is to know your poisonous fungi. And only about 1 to 2% of mushrooms are poisonous, and there's only a dozen that are fatal. And so there's one that's found in Central Texas that is fatal, and that would be the Amanita Biospor. I'm going to screw up this Latin, but Biosporangia, the Eastern North American destroying angel. And so I've spotted this one in East Texas and the conifers and the pines and also in Bastrop. So there are several toxic mushrooms that will make you ill in Central Texas, but there's only one that is fatal. And so I don't advise this, but you can actually taste poisonous mushrooms and spit it out. As long as you don't digest a mushroom, you're fine. And so mycologists, very experienced mycologists, will do this to sort of help with their process of elimination and determining a species. So now we're going to look at the soil food web. And so everyone has probably seen this chart if you're a gardener. And so there are 4 divisions of fungi in the soil food web. And so we're going to just zoom in on this second trophic level. And we're going to talk about these 4 major categories. And so we have saprophytic, which are the wood-loving decomposers. And then we have the mycorrhizal, which are the ones that associate with plants and do this exchange of carbon for water and nutrients. And then we're going to talk about parasitic, and then also endophytic, which are present through the lifespan of plants. And so I also want to note that things like yeast and molds are also fungi, and all things that are important to the soil web. And we know that yeasts are used in a lot of our breads, our foods, beers, kombuchas, wines, cheese. So miso, things like soy sauce. So that it's a huge part of why food is very tasty. And so as we go through these 4 divisions, you'll see how fungi is necessary for all plant life, including many of the compounds that are used in modern medicine. And so this first category here, and all of these photos that I'm sharing are photos from mushrooms found in Central Texas. And so I have the common and the Latin name as well. So the first category are Saprotrophic mushrooms, and these are the decomposers, and their role as decomposers are nutrient cyclers, and they're critical to the formation and regeneration of soils. And they form a very close relationship with the vast majority of leafy plants, often bonding with and weaving within them at the root level to create living networks that give structure to soil and scaffolding against erosion. They digest pathogens and toxins and churn carbon into the wider food web. And so we see a mushroom called the ink cap, and there's the yellow parasol, which is very common in planter pots. We also see oysters. Another example is shiitakes. Here's a few more, reishi, which is the mushroom of immortality in Chinese medicine, the turkey tail and chicken of the woods, which colonizes on the heartwood of Texas live oaks. And so because these spores float everywhere, the fungus makes itself home and reproduces on some living things. And a lot of this is due to the sort of human disruption. So like cutting a limb off of a tree, exposing its hardwood. You know, sometimes this happens with like windstorms and things like that, but a lot of times our beautiful live oaks, they end up being colonized and inoculated with these spores that are floating everywhere. So yeah. The next category here are the mycorrhizal, which means related to roots. And so this division of fungi forms beneficial relationships with trees and plants. And there's 2 main categories. So endo, which is about 70% of the mycorrhizal that's been studied, and ecto, and about 95% of plants form this partnership with fungi. And so the mycelium underneath the soil brings in water, phosphorus, and nitrogen and other trace minerals to the host plant through the roots. And the mycorrhizal greatly increases the surface area of the plant's root system, which is hugely beneficial in areas where drought is common and where the soils are poor in nutrients. So Central Texas, right? And the larger surface area gives plants an advantage to compete for nutrients. And so many farmers and gardeners are starting to learn about the importance of this mycorrhizal fungi, and compost companies, and there's even spores that you can buy to add in the nursery as you're growing. So here you can see a couple of examples of what this looks like when you add it to your plants as you're growing. And we have a few members in our organization, one who grows milkweed for butterflies, and she sort of came into learning about fungi through learning that mycorrhizal fungi helps with the native species of milkweed. So it helps them establish their roots and be able to connect to the soil and do this beautiful exchange. So here's some examples of mycorrhizal edible fungi. And I actually need to change out the Morel because it's just been reclassified from what I understand. It's now considered a decomposer fungi. So it needs to go into the first category. But some examples are truffles. I'm showing some pecan truffles, which we get a lot of questions about, and they can be found here. It's a huge investment if you try to inoculate your pecan trees with the truffle spores. Takes about like 10 years to get established and actually get truffles. So chanterelles, that's another category. And so these types are very difficult to cultivate. And this is why we find that they're so pricey at the grocery stores. So now we're going to talk about parasitic fungi. And so the largest organism on the planet, also known as the humongous fungus in Oregon, is a parasitic and edible mushroom commonly called the honey mushroom. And in 1998, a team from the US Forest Service set out to investigate the cause of a large tree die-off in East Oregon. And so several species of fungi belonging to the Amarilla genus, which is known as the honey fungus, covers an area of 2,385 acres. And so they colonize and kill a variety of trees and woody plants. And so this mushroom in this genus is also found in Austin, and I've seen them growing usually near the base of older or dying escarpment of live oaks. And so on the right here, you see lion's mane, which can be saprotrophic and also parasitic. And in Central Texas, I've seen it growing on post oak trees that are still alive. And usually they'll have like a canker, which is caused by drought or oak wilt. And the fungus is growing on the heartwood and colonizing the heartwood of a tree that is struggling. And there's been a lot of debate on how we define and classify parasitic fungi, especially since we know so little about fungi. We kind of take this like very binary view and we look at parasitic as a bad thing, but we also don't consider the human sort of interactive effect of fungi. So what we're doing in the environment a lot of times affects the reason why quote unquote parasitic fungi comes in and also starts to sort of help this plant recycle and return to the soil and decompose. And so the parasitic fungi, they prey on plants, trees, animals, and even humans. And this type of fungus weakens trees and nourishes other organisms. And so powdery mildew is considered parasitic. And if you're a gardener, you've probably seen this on your plants certain times of year. Some other very common examples on humans are dandruff or foot fungus. So if you've ever seen the documentary Planet Earth, you've maybe seen this zombie ant here on the left. And it gets infected by a fungus that controls its muscles, driving them away from the colony to the highest point of a tree for the best spore dispersal, eventually taking out the whole colony. And to the left, you see a fungus growing out of an ant's head. And so Cordyceps has become a very popular medicinal mushroom used for many things. It's considered like that athlete's medicine. It helps really oxygenate the blood. I use it when I go into high altitude. It's very good for helping you kind of get over that anaerobic point whenever you're doing a workout after the 15 minutes where you go from burning sugar to fat. Can't remember which one, but anyways, a lot of people take them before working out. You can buy it in like powders, put it in smoothies, tinctures, all kinds of things. And so several years ago, a 23-year-old figured out how to cultivate this mushroom on wheat berries. So in the past, they've been used in Chinese medicine since the 80s, and they became popular after the Chinese won the Olympics in track and field in the 80s. And people asked what the athletes took, and they said they took cordyceps And they've been very popular over there, and they've mostly been foraged in the mountains. And so it's a very good thing that we're now able to cultivate them and use this medicine. So here we see another parasitic fungus called Mesospora Cicadena, and it's found in soil and infects periodical cicada males as they come up from the soil to mate. And the infection results in a plug of spores that replaces the end of the cicada's abdomen while it is still alive, leading to the sort of non-stop mating, spreading the fungi, and eventually the death of the cicada. And people that have observed this sort of mating ritual call it looks like the cicada is doing like a salt shaker move. It's like very intense. And so chemical analysis by plant pathologist Matthew Casson of West Virginia University found that this fungus actually contains both psilocybin and amphetamine compounds, which is very interesting. But yeah, all things found out in the wild. So does anybody know what ant this is? So this here is the Tawny Crazy Ant. And so this ant was found by an exterminator in 2002 in Houston and was named for its quick and unpredictable movements. And so this ant produces and covers itself with an formic acid that it actually kills fire ants. And this seems like a good thing, right? We all don't like fire ants. But this species is an even bigger colony and has been found to do things like eat through electrical wiring because somehow they don't like the frequency. And so when I first heard about this ant, there was a lot of alarm because these populations were coming up through the port in Houston because, again, human disruption, human interaction. And they were beginning to kind of make their way into South Texas. And you can imagine places like NASA, they're very concerned about their electrical equipment, right? And so recently, a team of scientists from UT Brackenridge Field Lab in Austin were able to put the brakes on this invasive species of crazy ants by using a fungal pathogen. And I'm really going to butcher this one. I'm not even going to try. It's on the screen. And so in a few weeks, on Thursday, August 18th, we will have an online event where you can join us and learn about how this, quote, parasitic fungi has helped stop the spread of this ant in South Texas. So we hope you can join us, and I can share the link later in the chat. And so this last category is called endophytic fungi. And so it lives within the plant at least part of its life cycle without causing any apparent disease. So endophytes are ubiquitous and have been found in all species of plants studied to date. However, most of the endophytes and plants' relationships are not well understood, mostly because they are hidden and they don't always form mushrooms. And so this right here is a magnified image that shows the fungus in leaf tissue. So endophytes enhance host growth, the ability to absorb nutrients, and improve the plant's ability to tolerate stresses such as drought, salinity, and decrease stresses by enhancing plant resistance to insects, pathogens, other fungal pathogens, and herbivores. And it's sort of like a microbiome. And so we also call it the mycobiome. So the endophytic fungi there's been a lot of interest in the last few decades, a lot of really interesting science coming out because they produce so many different compounds and enzymes that are being used in medicines, biocontrols, etc. And so one of my favorite little endophytic facts is that researchers have recently discovered that a fungal endophyte associated with the pepper plant also creates the compound capsaicin. So everyone knows that's what makes peppers spicy. So this fungal relationship allows the plant to deter insects and other fungal pathogens. So it's a fungi preventing other fungi. So you can kind of see this sort of yin-yang effect here. So moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the other reasons why fungi is so beneficial in our environment. So we talked already actually a lot about the nutrient cycle and how fungi help cycle carbon and nutrients, sequester carbon, helps for better plant growth, water retention. Fungi can also be used to clean up oil spills. There's also some fungi that's being looked at that eat plastic. They're also very nutritious. They have vitamin D, which a lot of people lack and they don't get enough of. They have very complex sugars or beta glucans, which are really good for us and our immunity. They have a lot of trace minerals. A lot of the compounds, as I mentioned, are used in medicines. We're starting to see mushrooms being used in natural dyeing processes. They're leather made out of fungi. So here you see a shoe from Adidas that's using a fungal leather that's even stronger than leather, which is amazing. Fungi can be used to make packing materials. It's also being used in construction materials. So yeah, and if you're wanting to learn a little bit more, we have several programs on our website. If you go to our website, you can learn about a partnership we have with the UT Fungarium. This is a program started by Elizabeth Bowman, and she is working to rebuild the UT library of fungi in the herbarium. So this is in the UT Tower, and there used to be a fungarium until about the 90s, and I believe there's probably upgrades to the building, and they donated all the specimens to the New York Botanical Garden. And so now we're trying to rebuild that because we need it for all kinds of research. We have a program, we did a kickoff in March without knowing that we're going to go into severe drought, where we don't see a lot of rain or mushrooms fruiting. So we haven't had a lot of opportunities to engage the public and go out and collect and teach people how to add to the library, but there's something around 30 specimens there now. There was about over 1,000 specimens going back to the early 1900s. So that you can also learn about our mushroom recycling block program. And so this is a program, we have about 12 spots in Austin where you can pick up blocks, or you can even go to some of the mushroom farms. So if you're ever in this Buda area, we work with the mushroom farms where we divert the waste that would normally be going into the trash, this organic matter. We're instead taking the decomposer fungi and showing people how to grow mushrooms in the garden, how they can use it in their compost, use it as mulch, as nutrients for their actual plants. So it's sort of like an advanced, it's sort of like a more decomposing mulch, so to speak. So yeah, so you can check that out in the mushroom block giveaway and our Mycology in the Garden program. We also have, we're looking to reboot the Myco Research Station, which is at Circle Acres, which is a former dump that has been converted and regenerated with the help of fungi into a beautiful wetland near the Colorado River. And so we're hoping to, in the fall, to get that started again, get workshops going, and get some programming, regular programming going out there. So you can sign up to stay tuned into that. A few book recommendations. I recommend Radical Mycology. It's a very condensed book on all types of topics around mycology. And it's a book you can pick up and put down, very much written like a curriculum. Entangled Life is a new book that has come out that is very beautiful and written by Merlin Sheldrake. Recommend it for everyone. And then if you're looking to learn mushroom identification, we recommend the latest field guide from UT Press, and it's Mushrooms of the Gulf State. Okay, so now are we ready for the trivia question? And we can, this will be kind of tricky since it's a hybrid meeting. We have people in the chat and also people in person. So maybe we can do 2 giveaways. Let's do the first person in the chat, or actually we'll do 3 because there's people on YouTube as well. So YouTube, the chat, and also in person. So the first person in person that answers this question, just yell it out and stay muted so we don't tell people in the chat or on YouTube. But somebody over in the at the meeting, just kind of keep track of who answers it and send us an email and let us know the name and email, and we'll get you added to our newsletter and keep you updated, our member newsletter, keep you updated on everything going on. So here we go. Here is our trivia. So, what is the name of the fungus that ruled the planet 470 to 360 million years ago? And I hope we have some answers. I hope you all were paying attention, taking notes. Does anybody know? All right, so the answer is Prototaxides. So yeah, so about 470 to 360 million years ago, this is the fungus that ruled the planet. So yeah, so here's a little more info about our membership and a QR code if you want to scan it to learn more. But membership includes access to our member-only events. You always get priority tickets, discounts on workshops, unlimited recycled mushroom blocks, organizational support with access to our educational libraries and resources to sharpen your technical skills on mycology. And we also have a private chat for communicating on Discord. So yeah, so please join us. And just a reminder, these are some of our upcoming events. We have on the 18th, we have the presentation on crazy ants and the deadly fungus. And then we have the Myco Blitz coming up with the Balcones Canyonland Preserve starting on the 23rd. So you can be part of a global event of collecting and mapping Mycorrhizae fungi and understanding its importance in our ecosystem. And thank you everyone for your attention. You can follow us and learn more at centraltexasmycology.org. So we're going to take a few questions from the master naturalists on the Zoom, and then if people want to hang on YouTube, we'll do Q&A with YouTube after that. So yeah, so thank you everybody. What questions do we have today?
That one, she can hear you.
Have any fungus been found in samples from the moon?
Not that I know of. There was a lot of kind of clickbait articles when the rover, there were some photos taken and people thought they were seeing puffballs on the moon, but it was very, as I said, clickbait, and there was nothing, no samples, nothing like that. It was just these balls that someone observed with the rover. But if you look up puffballs on the moon, you can find some news articles on this. It was pretty entertaining.
I'm wondering whether lichens fall in the queendom.
Yeah, so lichens are a symbiotic relationship between algae and yeast and fungi. And there's actually more research where they're finding there's other sort of interactions happening. So, so there's a lot happening there. And as we know, like our science is sometimes limited where we can only look at certain things. We kind of get this tunnel vision. We're looking at certain things. And so there's a lot of things happening. You got to look at a lot of variables at one time to fully understand.
Anybody else in the room? Where did you find the morel?
The morel. So I never tell where I found my mushroom.
Nobody ever does.
No one ever does.
morel in
I'm
East
no
Texas.
fool.
I found morel in East Texas.
Oh, nice. Any other questions?
Anybody else in the room?
We'd really like to thank you. Very, very interesting. A topic that I personally know absolutely nothing about. So very interesting. What if I could? We'd like to listen to the rest of your questions and answers. But once we hang up, if the rest of you that are online that are master naturalists could please give me a couple of minutes to pull up WebEx, and then you can come on WebEx, and we'll drop the Zoom link.
Okay,
So
sounds
please
great.
continue. Thanks.
Okay, anybody out on YouTube that has questions? Just drop them in the chat. Ooh, so Alexis asked on YouTube, what are some common flavors of toxic mushrooms? So I've actually tasted some toxic mushrooms just out of curiosity. And again, I feel comfortable. I've been around mushrooms a lot. It's not something I recommend, of course, unless you're very comfortable. But it's kind of sad that poisonous mushrooms are toxic because they have a very spicy flavor that actually tastes really, really good. But again, don't do this unless you're very comfortable. Anybody else have questions? All right. And did anybody on YouTube, did they know the prototaxides? I didn't see anybody answering it. Y'all weren't paying attention. I get it. It's the middle of the day. There's a lot of other things to be doing. So how do you taste a toxic mushroom? I assume you need to avoid swallowing it. So yes, so as long as a poisonous mushroom doesn't go through your GI tract or through your liver, there's no way to get poisoned. So it's very, very important that if you do take that risk and taste it for the purpose of identification, that you spit it out and spit it out really well.
Just as a side note, we did have one in our room here in person that got your phototaxitis right. So we'll send you the name and email for her.
Oh, good. Great. So on YouTube, someone asks, are spores bad to inhale if you're spreading them in your garden? So if you get a mushroom block that is covered in what's called, there's a trichoderma, which is one of the most commonly cultivated and a lot of times accidentally cultivated fungus. It will create a lot of spores, and breathing them can cause problems. So it's already in the air, it's already in the soil, but not to that extent. So if you're, if you're sensitive to this sort of thing, I recommend wearing a mask when you're doing any work in the garden. And also, I do recommend if you are going to like a mushroom farm. So people that work at mushroom farms, they wear respirators, like really strong masks. So there's a thing called spore lung that people that work in mushroom farms have to be aware of. So you don't ever want too much of one thing in your lungs. So even though we're breathing about 1 to 10 spores per breath, we're not breathing so many at once. So yeah, it's the quantity that's can be very bad. Let's see. So Mike asks, one of the people here says they feed you for the rest of your life. What does it mean? I'm not sure I follow. Prototaxides. Patrick Gartner, you're very close with your spelling. So if you want to email us your info, we'll get you a membership set up. Or sorry, email us your email. And so Edna asks, are poisonous mushroom spores bad? So from what I understand and read, and I may be wrong, but I don't think the spores contain the toxins. It's more of the fruit body. So even though spores carry a lot of DNA, they don't carry the toxins. And how did I figure out that morels are not mycorrhizal? So I learned that from Liz Bowman and she went to the North American, not North American, it's like the American Mycological Association conference in Gainesville a couple of weeks ago, and someone presented on the reclassification. So I don't know how much it's been communicated out yet, and I haven't even read any papers to understand how they came to that conclusion. All I know is when I've gone out looking for morels in various geographic areas, I've found them with all types of trees. It seems like there's something happening where they're decomposing in the soil or decomposing a certain type of soil that they like. But again, I'm no expert. And if people are interested in learning more about cultivating morels, you can check out the Danish Morel Project. And there's a couple patents as well, companies and people in China that have patents that you can read through. So one thing that I've noticed is they don't tell you much about the grasses that they grow with. So there's something happening, interactive effect happening with the grasses. Definitely the type of soil and soil mix is important. But yeah, you can look and see the methodologies that they're doing with the Danish Morel Project. And feel free to email us if you all know anything or want to share techniques or had success. I know a lot of people will make slurries, which just means like blending up or saving water from morels that are washed, or blending up morels and like putting them in their backyard or wherever they think is like a favorable area, and they have success. But they're very finicky. So okay, anybody else have questions? Will you be able to offer a workshop on how to identify and forage for edible mushrooms? So we are in September, we have our Intro to Mushroom ID class coming up. It's not on the calendar, but it will be a free sliding scale donation if you want to class. So make sure you're signed up for a newsletter to stay up with all of that. Anybody else?
Thank you very much, Angela. That was very good presentation. Awesome.
All right. Thanks, everybody. All right. I don't see any other questions. Thanks, everybody, for coming. And oop, there's one more. Any mushroom species which help with trees like oaks? So I've seen a lot of mycorrhizal fungi with oaks. So our beautiful Texas chanterelles that grow here are mycorrhizal fungi. Boletus or rutaboletus fungi are mycorrhizal with oaks. And if you're wanting to kind of dig in a little bit more, I find that iNaturalist can be helpful, but really it does take time just going out and finding these mushrooms growing with next to the trees and then learning if they're mycorrhizal fungi. And so, as I mentioned too, there's a lot of fungi that don't create fruits. And so that's why this mycelium mapping project is so important, because we want to know all of the types of fungi. We only know about 10%, so it's going to be great to find out, are there other mycorrhizal fungi that are not necessarily creating fruits that are working with our native species? And so, so if you haven't had a chance yet to sign up for this program, I'm going to drop the link in the chat. And if you're in Central Texas, definitely join us. The deadline to sign up for this collection is the 15th of August. So, and there's a lot of dates in the late September where you can join and learn from experienced mycologists on how this all works.
Angel, I don't see that in our chat.
Okay, let me drop that again. There you go.
Thanks.
Okay, is that it for everyone? I'm going to give it a few minutes to allow for some more questions. And if not, we'll say goodbye. And so how did the 10% number come about? So I'm not sure. I've seen the same thing about microbes and bacteria. It seems like it's like a really hard number to guess. But I think that that's a good one to Google too. And I think I have tried to Google it to try to figure out, like, how do we know that there's only 10%? But I'll ask a few more experienced scientists and mycologists to see if there's a reason why that number exists. But that is a good question. So Patrick asks, any programs, companies in Austin that keep mushroom farms inside the restaurants? I worked at a place in New York that had a mushroom farm in it. So Patrick, you're probably talking about Smallhold, and they have the mushroom farms, the micro mushroom farm. And there are 2 of those in Austin at the Central Markets. I'm not aware that there are any at a restaurant, but it really is like a demonstration of a kind of a larger, more showy mushroom farm. And there's a lot of different companies coming out with these at-home kind of fruiting chamber devices where you can set controls to control humidity and temperature to like the ideal of a certain species of fungi. So I don't know of any besides Smallholds and they have the farm in South Austin and Buda. And they just opened one in Los Angeles as well. Oh, so you're asking about the ash juniper. So let me grab that link. We have the recording. We record all of our talks. Most of them are recorded and saved on our YouTube channel, so definitely subscribe there. So yeah, so the link is, it's called Mountain Cedars, and I'm going to drop it in the chat. Sorry, just a few seconds. So mountain cedars as groundwater protectors. And this was one of my favorite talks that we've done. So the mycologist that we're working with, she also digs into Mycorrhizae, and she's the person that we're going to be working with out at the Balcones Canyonland Preserve. And so someone asks, is chicken of the woods the same as hen of the woods? So those are two different species of mushrooms. So hen of the woods is also maitake. And chicken of the woods is a latiporous species. Anybody else? Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming out this afternoon. And we will have this recording up on YouTube, so you can always go back and watch it again. All right. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.